It is great to be back. Man, I can't believe it has been 20 years since I last walked the hallways of this school. It looked nothing like it does now back then. But as you heard, I am a proud former member of the Wyndham Chamber Singers. Any Chamber Singers in here? Got a few, awesome. And also a first year member of the first ever Wyndham High School football team. So I don't know if there's any football players in here. We got a few. Awesome. Thank you. I was so skilled, in fact, that Coach Rossetti gave me a very special position. I don't even know if it still exists, but back then it was called left out. And I really didn't play too much, but I provided a lot of entertainment for the other players who took the sport much more seriously than I did. But as you just heard, I live out in Hollismeade with my wife, our dogs, our cats, our chickens, and this is my wife up here named Erin. Erin also went to Wyndham High School, and that's our little Pomeranian named Cherry. That's our little Yorkie Poo. She's a rescue dog. Yes, she's wearing pajamas. And no, that's not just because I'm a creepy animal guy, because I am and I own that. But it's also because she has bad allergies, so she scratches all the time. And we kind of just collect animals. And in fact, one day, one of my goals is to be on Animal Hoarders. And so probably some of my fellow animal lovers in the room today can relate with that. Most recently, we picked up another new dog because Cherry is now 15, and so we wanted to get her a little sister. And so we took delivery of little Tootsie Pride. She's our new littlest Pomeranian, who's about 6 months old. And so she has a lot of fun playing with our chickens. We raise a very special type of chicken. We raise the silky chickens. I don't know if you guys ever heard of those before. They're the ones with the cool hair. They have like the afro tops on them. If you've never seen one before, this is shish kebab. She's about the size of a softball, and she's a lot of fun. She's very friendly. In fact, if you were to come by my house some Saturday afternoon, which please don't, because that would be weird, but if you did come by my house some Saturday afternoon, she would probably let you pick her up and eat right from your hand. And so we have a great time out there, and I come from a family where, in fact, all of my older brothers even went to this high school. So my oldest brother, Donnie, this guy right here, graduated from Wyndham in around 1984. The guy next to him in the middle picture is my brother Tom, who graduated from Wyndham in 1987, and then my brother Michael graduated from here in 1999. And what was kind of interesting in my family is my three older brothers, it was like they came into this world with some sort of internal GPS directing them exactly what to do with their life. It was like they were born and they immediately knew who they wanted to become. And people would ask them, hey, what do you want to do with your life? And they'd get all those challenging questions as they were getting older of what they're going to be, where they're going to go to college, what their 5-year, 10-year, 50-year plan was. And they would know. And in fact, my brother Donnie, this guy here with a guitar in his hands, I can remember as a young man growing up and listening to Donnie practicing guitar all the time. And my dad, who's kind of like a very straight-laced engineer type of guy, used to ask my brother Donnie, hey, look, when are you going to think about getting a real job someday? You know, what are you going to do for a career path? How many people do you know who are musicians who make a living playing music? And Don would say, I don't know, Dad, but I know I want to be a guitar player. I know this is what I love. And eventually he went through school and went through college, and now he has a master's degree in jazz composition and a master's degree in classical music, and plays music for a living, doing exactly what he always told everybody he wanted to do. And my brother Tom was kind of a lot like my dad, in that my brother Tom was always very entrepreneurial and very business-minded. And when I was a young man, Tom and I were always kind of scheming up new business ideas. Some were legit, some were kind of sketchy, some were just straight up pyramid schemes. But Tom and I, we had a lot of fun thinking of these business ideas. And my dad used to talk with him about his career options, and Tom would say, someday I'm going to go off and become a big executive, I'll make lots of money and wear fancy suits. And he talked about all these things he wanted to do with his life, like he knew exactly what he wanted to do. And eventually he went through high school and then went off to college, and now he works at really big fancy jobs and flies over the country selling stuff to companies like Amazon and Blue Origin and Facebook and Meta and all these different places, doing exactly what he always told everybody he was going to do with his life. And there's my brother Michael. And my brother Michael's kind of unique in that around the 6th grade, he was playing the trombone, and then one day he put down the trombone and picked up a pair of drumsticks. And it was like he never put those drumsticks down ever again. And everywhere as we went, my brother had a pair of drumsticks in his back pocket. And he'd be playing drumsticks off the dashboard of the car when we were going on a road trip. We'd be setting the dinner table for a family dinner, and my brother would be hitting the plates just to see what the tones of the different dishes sounded like. And after we'd be getting ready for Thanksgiving dinner, my brother would pull out his drumsticks, he'd be playing them off the cups in the dinner, ding, 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 potatoes. I'd be like, look dude, I'm a little fat kid. Quit the food abuse and pass the gravy. But he continued practicing, getting better and better and better. Eventually he moved out to New York City, went through college, got out of college, and now he travels all over the world with many bands you've probably heard of. And I've seen him on private jets before, and I've seen him in some books, and I've seen him do all these things he always told everybody he was going to do with his life. And they always knew exactly what they wanted to do. And then there was me. And man, growing up with 3 older brothers who knew exactly what they wanted to do with their life put a lot of pressure on me, like, why don't I know what I want to do with my life? It was like my biggest challenge in school was, how quickly can I get to the trash can before that kid throws out those perfectly good uneaten chicken nuggets? Or I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my life and how I was going to spend my time. And we'd start doing these assessment tests. And I remember like junior and senior year, they'd be passing out these assessment tests, and my buddy Mike Robinson, and he was super smart, and they'd be passing out, like, Michael, what are you good at? And he'd start writing down, I'm good at math, I'm good at critical thinking, I'm good at science. And Mike's now an engineer, like literally designing rockets. And my buddy Kevin, he'd do these assessment tests and be like, oh, I'm good at biology, I'm good at creative thinking. And now he's a doctor down at Mass General. And they'd be like, and David, what are you good at? I'd be like, talking fast and sweating a lot. And it didn't really line up with any job descriptions. And it's funny because I laugh about it now. But back then I didn't. And probably some of you right now can relate with what I'm saying. Probably some of you right now have a burn inside your belly. A vision of exactly who you want to become someday. And when you go to bed at night, you can picture it. You just can't wait for the next day. You just can't wait to get out on your own and start doing your own thing because you know exactly who you want to become. And undoubtedly, you've run into people who have told you that's not possible. It's not going to work. You've run into those family members or those relatives or those former best friends who just can't wait to hit play on your highlight reel of failures in life. Just to remind you why what you want to do isn't possible. You don't come from the right town. You don't have enough education. You're not smart enough. But you got this burn inside of you. And if that describes you today, I would challenge you to listen to that burn. There's a reason it's there to push you forward for all the challenges you're going to face for chasing after something that excites you so much. And then there's probably some of you today who are more like I was. You have no idea what you want to do with your life. You know you just kind of want to make it through today. You know you're kind of dreading finding out who your dance partner is going to be in 45 minutes. You're just trying to make it through life, and who knows if I'll go to college or not, and who knows if I want to do this. And I'll tell you, those people, you have time. You've got time. Give yourself time and space. You'll figure it out. It'll come to you. But today we're going to start with a true story about a woman named Elizabeth. Elizabeth grew up in the inner city of New Jersey. She had 5 older brothers and 2 older sisters. And Elizabeth grew up in a family that's probably a bit unlike some of ours in this room. In that Elizabeth grew up with parents who never wanted to have her. In fact, Elizabeth was the end result of a decision that her mother made that she always regretted. And so every time Elizabeth's mom looked at her, she was reminded of this big mistake she made. And so as Elizabeth was growing up, she was reminded what her mother thought of her, that she was just a loser, that she was worthless, that she had no purpose, that her own mother didn't even mean to have her, so why on earth would she deserve anything better than what she currently has? And in her mother's attempt to keep holding her down in life, Elizabeth would be forced to be the 5th one into the dirty bathwater, and she could feel the grit against her skin as she slid into the tub. And as a young girl, sometimes her mom didn't even want her going off to school for fear that the school would figure out about what was happening at home. Her own brothers would take advantage of her, and when she would go to her family wouldn't listen to her, and they would turn a blind eye and tell her that nobody needs to talk about it. It's probably her own fault. She probably led them on to do these things anyhow. As Elizabeth got older, she began to to get a vision of who she might be able to become someday. And so in some of Elizabeth's darkest times, she began to sprout this dream of someday I just want to be able to move on with my life, get out of this home, and have a family that never wonders if I love them. And that was Elizabeth's big dream. It wasn't the type of dream we see today. It wasn't the type of dream we see today on Instagram, or on TikTok, or on Facebook, or on social media, or on television, where it's like, man, I gotta have the Bentley. My money don't jiggle, jiggle, it folds. I'm in my feet. You really gotta see, right? Her dream was simply someday to go off and someday have a family that never wonders if she loves them. A dream that seems so small compared to the things that we're told today that our dreams need to compare to. And as Elizabeth got older, she began to prepare for what she wanted. You see, Elizabeth began sharing some of her dreams to her teachers at school. And her teachers at school told her, look, Elizabeth, there's some things you can control. You can control the books you're reading. You can control the people that you're putting yourself around at school. And her teachers would introduce her to books that would help her think bigger than where she currently was. And Elizabeth's mom didn't want her reading at night because her mother didn't believe she deserved to be educated. So sometimes Elizabeth would hide under the sheets with a book and disappear into those words of the pages, imagining this life that someday she could have. She began to look at her circle of friends. And she realized that some of the people she was spending the majority of her time with were more like anchors on her boat than they were propellers. And there were some people that she needed to stop spending so much time with. And it wasn't because those people were stupid or worthless, or even because she was any better than them. It was just because they were on a different path. And as much as Elizabeth wanted to step back and keep pulling them out of their negative situations, she knew she needed all the strength she could muster to pull herself out of her own situation. And finally, Elizabeth learned that no matter what she did, she had to try and keep a positive attitude. And when you grow up in a family like Elizabeth's, keeping a positive attitude, sometimes all that means is that I'm going to push through to tomorrow. I'm not going to make this decision tonight. I'm going to wait until tomorrow. I'm going to see what tomorrow brings. So I have a vision for where I'm headed. And right now it seems so dark, it seems so depressing, it seems so lonely and so hopeless. But there's a burn inside of me. And I know who I want to become. And in the summers, Elizabeth would be dropped off at her aunt and uncle's house. They lived on a farm. They had all kinds of animals. And her aunt and uncle would love on her and believe in her and talk with her about her dreams and her goals and her visions of who she wanted to become. And they would tell her about all these things are possible. And they'd let her grow her hair out long and wear clean clothes, which are two things that her own mother wouldn't allow her to do. And they would encourage her to hold close to that burn that was deep inside of her. And that dream inside of Elizabeth grew deeper. And it's difficult because sometimes in life, the people who should want the best for us hurt us the most. And it's the people who should be acting the exact opposite way that sometimes hurt us the most. And it's not fair, and at the end of this message, I'm not going to have some magical reason as to why your life is more difficult than the person you're sitting next to. Because sometimes life just isn't fair in certain seasons. And it's a matter of how are we going to push through this? What things do we need to add to our arsenal so we can make it through this challenging, incredible time? And still pursue that burn that's inside of us. You see, other times people let us down and they don't even know they did. This picture is a photo of me and my dad. My dad is 81 years old. He lives over in Westbrook, Maine, in one of those fancy senior citizen, outlets over there that looks like a ski lodge. And my dad and I talk just about every single day. And my dad is kind of funny because my father is kind of the exact opposite of who my mother was. And so my mom was kind of like the world's ultimate encourager. Like, you go to my mom and no matter what you're doing, she's cheering you on. Or my mom was just the most positive person on the planet. And she would cheer me up. My mom, she was the proud member, and probably the only member of the David Pride fan club. And she'd be cheering me on no matter what. I could be singing with the chamber singers, or I could be peeing my name off the roof on Christmas Day into the snow, and she'd be cheering me on. She was just the best lady on the planet. And my dad was just kind of, the opposite. And not that he was the worst person on the planet, but more like my dad was kind of the man that you go to if you want to find out why your idea won't work. Right? Like you have a big dream, like, hey, I really want to do this. And then my father would probably counter with, oh, really? Well, did you think about this? Hey, Dad, I think I want to go try this. And my father would likely respond with, oh, really? Well, do you remember when you failed trying that? So he's not the most motivational character on the planet. And for a long time, I never really understood why he never got excited for me in life. And I specifically remember this time about 15 years ago. I was in Scarborough, Maine. I was walking into the pet store out there on Route 1 in Paws. And behind the counter was this blonde-haired girl, and I got talking with her. And I was kind of trying to work up the guts to ask her out. And I know this is going to come to a shocker to some of you, but when it comes to the women, I've really got no game. And back then, it wasn't as easy as swipe left or swipe right. Like, you had to come up with pickup lines. And I'm sitting there, standing at the counter, just kind of sweating on her table. And I'm trying to wait for like the perfect pause to like slip in my pickup line. And the only things I could think of were super creepy. And so I'm telling her about my animals at home, which always scores points. I'm telling her about, about my life and about all these cool things I'm going to do. And it's like literally like a half hour and I'm going through like all the classic stories that always win people over. And as I'm standing there sweating, I'm like, man, I got to come up with something good. And she's talking, I can tell she's kind of like waiting for me to land the plane. I can kind of sense that she was kind of picking up what I was putting down, but I didn't really have it in me to bring it home. And so I'm like, man, okay, some pickup lines. Like, all I could think of was like, are your legs tired? Because you've been running through my mind all day. Or today's version, are your eyes tired? Because I've been creeping your TikTok. Don't use that, you'll get arrested. And so I couldn't come up with a good pickup line, so I'm standing there, and I'm trying to think of what can I possibly say to ask this girl out. And then I realize in my back pocket I have a secret weapon. I pull out my cell phone, and I show her a photo of my long-haired chihuahua, Gizmo. I say, hey, look, I forgot to mention, I have a long-haired chihuahua named Gizmo. Gizmo wears these cute little sailor outfits. She'll ride along in your arms, and she does the coolest little tricks, like poop under the dinner table when you least expect it. And that must have been the one that sealed the deal, because finally she said, look, do you want to go out sometime? And I was like, yes, I do. Let's go. So I got her number, and I furiously texted her the next day, and she played it cool and didn't answer me for like a week and a half. And then I texted her again, and she's like, yeah, let's go out. So we went out, and I think we went to Starbucks on our first date. And we're sitting there, sucking down a caramel latte. And I'm like, man, I really like this girl. She was funny. She was smart. She was making me laugh. We were coming up with all these different things, having a great time. So, man, I know I want to go on a second date. So I text her a few days after that, say, hey, you want to go out again? And she's like, yeah, let's do it. So we go out on a second date. And this second date, I was like, man, I really like this girl. I can tell. So we went out on a third date. We went out on our third date. We're on our third date, and I realized I need to marry this girl. So I went home that afternoon, and I bought an engagement ring. And I went and I picked up that engagement ring. And I remember picking up the engagement ring and looking at this ring. I'm like, oh, man, I am so excited. My parents are going to be jacked. They are not going to believe that I'm going to propose to this girl. So I drive over to my parents' house, and my parents lived in Barney Mill Estates, at Stagecoach Lane, in Wyndham here. And I pulled over into their driveway, and my parents were out in the yard doing their favorite thing, raking. My mom was in the front yard, my dad was in the backyard. And I run up to my mom, and I can't wait to tell my mom, because I know she's going to be pumped for me, because she's pumped about everything I tell her. So I go up to her and I go, hey, Mom. She's like, yes. I'm like, Mom, you know Aaron? I think so. Mom, I'm going to ask Aaron to marry me. And my mom was just kind of quiet for a second. And she goes, oh, exciting. Now go tell your dad. And so I go back around the house, my dad's back there by our pool. And man, in my head, I'm picturing what this is going to be like. This is something you hope you only tell your parents once. My dad's back there raking, and I'm picturing in my head his reaction. If I know anything, it's that this is going to be straight up man hour. Like, I'm going to tell him this. We're running out in the woods. We're going to strangle a deer. We're going to skin it alive and wear that skin to church the next morning. I know this is going to be straight up, man. I can't wait to tell my dad. This is going to be straight up father-son bonding time. He's going to be so excited for me. And so I run up to my dad, and he's standing there raking. Just slowly putzing along. And I go, hey, Dad. And my dad kind of has this thing in his brain where the first time you call him, he doesn't answer. It doesn't matter if it's on the phone. It doesn't matter if it's in person. His ears just don't work the first time. Says, hey, Dad. He keeps raking. Hey, Dad. Finally, he stops. I go, Dad, you know Aaron? And my dad's main accent says, yeah? I said, Dad, I'm going to ask Aaron to marry me. And I'm waiting for his reaction. Like, I know something, we're going to light something on fire. Like, I know this is going to be an awesome bonding experience with my dad. And my dad looks at me. And he doesn't say anything. And he grips the rake a little tighter. Starts raking again. And I said, Dad, I'm going to ask Aaron to marry me. And finally he stops. He looks at me and he says, if that's what you want to do, David, don't get divorced. And that was it. And then he went back to raking. And I remember leaving the backyard being like, man, what is wrong with my dad? Why isn't he excited for me? This is such big news. I can't believe he's not more pumped for me. And I went back to my car, and a few months later, I asked Aaron to marry me, and we've now been married for almost 16 years. And I remember thinking, though, for the longest time, wondering, why on earth wasn't my dad? Like, what does my dad possibly know about love? Maybe he just doesn't get the type of love that Aaron and I have. He's only been married for 53 years. And then one day I found out. You see, my father and I, we have a Christmas dinner date, as we call it, where every year around Christmas, he and I would go out and have a fancy dinner at some restaurant. And about 3 years ago, we went out to the MK Kitchen in Gorham, and we went out to have some nice food. And I remember that afternoon, it started raining, and the roads were freezing over with ice, and the roads were getting really slippery, and I was worried that the restaurant might be closed, and so I called ahead, and I wanted to make sure that we could get a table near a window so we could watch people fall on the curb. And if you think it's funny to watch people fall on the curb, it's even funnier to watch an old man laugh at old people falling on the curb. And so I reserve our table, and I go and I pick up my dad. And we drive over to the restaurant. We sit down and we get talking. And as we're talking, my dad begins to open up to me and share with me some stuff about his own life. Stuff I've never heard before. My dad's not really an emotional type of person. And he starts telling me about how when he was a young man, every time he was excited about something and he went to his father, it was like his father didn't get it. And his father was never excited for him. And my dad starts telling me this, about how so many times he was let down by his father, and his dad just never reacted the way he wanted him to. And then he ends this story with, and David, that's why I'm always so excited for you whenever you have big news. And I'm like, yeah, Dad, you are killing it in that department. You know, but sometimes people let us down, and they don't even know they did. And if we're not careful, we put another piece of duct tape around our heart. We decide, I don't need that person in my life anymore. That's the last time that person gets to speak to me that way. Or even worse, we say something that we've always wanted to say. Because we deserve to say it. Because somebody needs to put that person in their place. And now's my opportunity. And like a shaking can of Pepsi, I'm just going to let you have it. And we never stop to consider their journey. And in today's world, it's like we've gotten to this point where we can't disagree without disrespecting. It's like I can't have a different opinion than you without just something extreme happening. And if we would just pause for a moment to consider other people's journey, we might find a few less people that we need to run around mad at all the time.
Well, after high school, I went off to college. I went to SMTC. Got a degree in liberal studies, which is kind of a fancy way of saying, would you like paper or plastic? And after college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I was a really bad employee. And I knew I didn't want to work for other people. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But I couldn't start a business quite yet, so my brother called me and offered me a job in South Carolina. He said, David, I need somebody to come down here and sell Carhartt clothing to tobacco farmers. And I don't know if any of you have ever worn Carhartt clothing, but triple stitch, partially canvas pants in 115-degree heat on a tobacco field is not what you want to be wearing. And so I went out and I was trying to sell this clothing to these farmers, and naturally these farmers didn't want it. And I sucked at the job, and 3 months into it, my boss figured out that I stunk at the job, and shortly after that I was fired. Well, at the same time I was fired, this new technology was coming out called Facebook. And the same week that I was laid off, Facebook came out with these things they were calling business pages, where they were allowing companies to have their own profiles to eventually advertise from and reach communities around them. And I remember reading about this and saying, I think that's where everything is headed. And so I called my dad to tell him that I knew I was never going to be able to find a job down here. I was going to have to create one. And so I started marketing myself as a social media professional and began to grow a business. And at the same time, this television show was becoming very popular. Probably some of you have seen the show Shark Tank. And I remember sitting at home watching Shark Tank and being like, man, that's the key to getting rich. You got to get one of these sharks. You got to get one of these rich people to invest in you. So I started realizing I need to find a rich person. And so I pulled out my Rolodex, my phone of the hundreds of people I know who are millionaires that actually contains only one name. And the name it contains was a man that my mother introduced me to. You see, when I was 15, my mom used to ask me what I was going to do with my life. And I would say, I don't know, Mom. I want to make money. I want to help people. To which my dad couldn't wait to reply with, you can do one of those two things, but you won't be able to do those two things at the same time. And my entire life, when people would ask me what I wanted to do, and I'd say, I don't know, I want to figure out how to make money, be an entrepreneur, and help people. It's like those two things couldn't mix. And so one day I came home, I was 15 years old, and on my bureau was a handwritten note from my mom. It was on a little post-it note that was stuck on a newspaper article she had cut out. And this article was written for the local paper. And it was written by, back then, the richest man from our town. And it was talking about how he had started all these different businesses, and he didn't understand why other businesses from the area didn't reach out to him for advice, because he'd be happy to meet with them. And my mother cut out this article. And on it she wrote, David, you keep telling me that someday you want to figure out how to make money and help people. You need to convince this man to be your mentor. And so at 15 years old, I sat down and I wrote a letter to him. And I said, hey, look, you don't know me and I don't know you, but my mom says you're the richest man in my town. I was wondering if you'd teach me how to become rich. And I mailed him this letter thinking I'd never hear from him. And about 3 months later, he called me from his winter home in Vegas and said, David, I got your letter. It sounds like you're a motivated young man. I'd be happy to meet with you. And we met that first time, and then we continued to meet. We've met ever since, about every single year, talking about my business and goals and things I was trying to accomplish with my life. And it instilled in me this wisdom and this value of having a mentor, of somebody who's done the things you want to do, actively involved in your life. And so naturally, when I was going to launch my first company, who did I think of? My mentor. So I called my mentor, and I said, hey, look, I'm about to start this company. We're going to do social media for other businesses. I really don't even know what that means, but my gut says it's where everything is headed. I want you to invest because my company is going to be the best investment that your company has ever made. And this man owned 68 different companies back then. And so he said that he'd be willing to meet with me and listen to my pitch. And he said, all right, David, come on by the house and bring your business plan. I'm like, okay, Google, what is a business plan? So I went over and drove to his house. And I remember pulling up in my '02 Mercury, parking next to his baby blue Bentley, leather cream interior, helicopter pad in the backyard. Go in, get talking with the man, tell him about this vision of where I think things are headed with social media, and why I think the service I'm going to offer is going to be very successful. And I can't believe it, but at the end, he agrees he's going to invest with me.
Hey, put your phone down.
And he says, David, not only am I going to invest in you, but I want you to understand that I actually don't get this business at all. But what I do understand is that you're a really motivated young man, and I believe in you. So this investment is much more about me believing in you than it is me believing in this business. And I said, that's fine, I'm down with that. I remember I got back in my car and I was driving home and I called my wife. And I was so excited. It was like one of the best feelings of my life. And I was on the top of the mountain. Just so excited. I remember telling her that, like, look, we're actually not going to go bankrupt. We're actually going to be successful. We were so broke at this point, and I couldn't believe it. Like, I closed this deal. This whole thing was happening. My life was going to change. It's like this one moment in my life, I knew all of a sudden it had just taken a turn for the better. And I got home that afternoon, and I sat down on my laptop, and I wanted to write my mentor a note, thanking him for his time. So I sat down, and I wrote him an email, and I said, look, thank you for your time today. I'm so excited that we're going to be business partners. In fact, part of my business plan is that I go out and I do these seminars and I talk about social media at conferences. And it's one of the ways my business will grow. So I'm attaching to this email a video link of me speaking at a recent conference. I hope you'll watch it. I can't wait to get started. And in my head, I'm picturing my mentor opening this email, then clicking that YouTube link, watching me speak and being so impressed and being more excited about his investment and maybe even doubling down. Man, I remember laying in bed that night. You just kind of pray and you sleep fast. You're like, man, I just can't wait till the next morning. And finally I got to bed that night and I woke up the next morning and I opened my laptop and there was an email from my mentor. I couldn't wait to read it. Because I knew he was going to be really excited for me too, and I knew he was going to tell me about how impressed he was with the speech, and I knew he was going to tell me about the future of our partnership. And I opened it up and I said, hey David, thank you for your time yesterday too. Look, I want you to know I went ahead and watched that video of you speaking. I want you to know you are the worst speaker I've ever seen in my life. Your jokes were not funny. You talk too fast. And minute 3:34, the man in the dark suit in the front row on the left-hand side was falling asleep as you spoke. Because of this, David, I don't think I actually believe in your business any longer. I can no longer invest with you. But good luck. Man, I remember closing my laptop. I don't know if any of you guys ever had those moments where you go from the top of the mountain to underneath the mountain within 12 hours. And it's like, I didn't even know emotions can fluctuate this radically so quickly. And I decided that out of spite, I was going to go out and build this company without him. And I wrapped my heart with duct tape towards this man and said, I don't even need your help anymore. I don't need to ask you questions. And I would run into challenges over the next year that I could have called him and he could have helped me fix immediately. But because I was mad at him that he gave me some feedback that I didn't like, I decided I'm never going to talk to him anymore. And it wasn't until about 18 months later I was walking into the gym. They used to lift things heavier than Twinkies and Ho-Hos. And as I'm walking into the gym, my cell phone rings. It's my mentor. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, cool. He must have, at the time I was writing for Huffington Post about marketing, so I said, boy, he must have read some of my writing. He must have seen me speak. He must have seen some of my videos. He must have heard about some of my clients. So I pick up the phone and I'm thinking he's going to tell me. He's rethought the whole thing. So I pick up and says, hey, David. He says, look, I've been thinking about your business. I say, yeah, here it comes. He said, look, I still don't want to invest. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And he's like, but I've also been thinking about the fact that we haven't spoken in 18 months. And I'm curious if that might be because of the feedback that I gave you. We went on to talk about the reasons he said the things he said, and how I took them and the way he meant them. And it's funny because in 17 years of mentorship under this man, the greatest lesson he's ever taught me hasn't had anything to do with finding sick companies and making them healthy and selling them, or going off and building a huge business, or how to do fantastic things with your money. The greatest lesson my mentor ever taught me has had everything to do with forgiveness. And how sometimes people let us down and they don't even know they did. And if we're not careful, we carry that grudge around towards them, and anybody that looks like them, or anybody that talks like them. We never consider what they might have been trying to say, or perhaps even what their journey was. You see, in life, we're all on a different journey. We all are going through things that other people don't know about. And I remember when my journey changed. It was freshman year at SMCC. I was playing college soccer. And I remember I was laying under the bench press. And I was rubbing my collarbone and I felt this weird bump. And when you're playing college soccer, you get bumps and bruises all the time, so I didn't think anything of it. And a few months later, I flew off to Houston, Texas for a completely unrelated surgery. And this surgery that was supposed to take like 45 minutes wound up taking 3.5 hours. And I woke up and I remember this dude standing over me, this guy named Dr. Jim Garza. And he had this freaked out look on his face. I thought maybe I was pregnant. He says, "Hey David, look, we did the surgery." I'm like, "All right, cool. Why do you look so freaked out?" He's like, "Look, David, we did the surgery, but there's something weird." And I said, "Okay, well, what's that?" He said, "David, we did the surgery, but the thing is we found a 6-inch tumor around your heart. You have cancer from your neck to your groin." And at 19 years old, my journey changed. And soon I began the regimen of 6 months of chemotherapy, 12 weeks of radiation. And I didn't start losing my hair until like 5 months into treatments. So I definitely didn't look like a cancer kid. In fact, I was like 2 months too old for Make-A-Wish. Anyhow, not that I'm still carrying a grudge. But I remember one of the things I was thinking about when I got my diagnosis is, my mother always used to say, "David, look for the positive. I remember being like stage 3 cancer. What's the positive in this?" And then I realized I could get a handicap parking pass. So I told my doctor, "Look, I need to get a handicap parking pass." And as he was writing out the expiration date on the little placard, I realized he was doing it with a marker, which meant that with a little bit of nail polish remover, I could extend that expiration date for years to come. And so one day I was pulling onto campus at SMCC, and I put my little handicap pass up in the window, and I started walking into class. And you see, with the types of treatments I had, I would go in on Tuesday, I'd get chemo on Tuesday, I'd be sick by Wednesday, I'd be sick Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and by Monday I'd be feeling good again, I'd have a good week, and then I'd start chemo again on Tuesday. And on this day, it was on my weeks when I felt good. So I pulled into class, put my handicap placard in the window, and started going to class. And from the back of the parking lot, a woman yells at me. And she says, "What are you doing parking there? That spot is for sick people. You should be ashamed of yourself." And for that woman, at that moment, that comment made sense. She'd probably been wanting to say it for months. She'd probably seen me pulling in there, getting out of my car, looking perfectly healthy, walking to class, and been dying to give me a piece of her mind because she deserved to. Because somebody needed to say something. Somebody needed to put this person in his place. But they never stopped to consider my journey. And we're all on a different journey in life. And we have this option of we can all make deposits in each other's lives, or we can all make withdrawals. And the difficulty is we don't know each other's balance. We don't know when that last joke that, because it makes everybody laugh, it can't possibly hurt their feelings. We don't know when that's going to be the last withdrawal that person can handle. We look for ways to make deposits and build each other up. It's okay to disagree on things. It doesn't mean we have to hate each other. So finally today I'm going to end with a story. This is a photo of my favorite car I've ever owned. It's an '02 Mercury Sable. I know you're jealous. This car is beautiful. Had a custom paint job, cranberry and rust. Had 4 great tires. Had some metal in it. Had like custom seats in the front that when you sit down in them, they wrap your arms around you like a hug from my Aunt Carol. I had worn this car down, had like 250,000 miles on it. My mother gave it to me when my mom lost her ability to drive, and so I was so jacked to have this car. I drove this car all over the country pitching clients. In fact, I slept in that back seat multiple times because I couldn't afford a hotel room in the state where I was pitching a client. And one day I was out and I was driving home, and my wife and I lived on Haven Road in Wyndham. And the car started making some funny noises. And I'm not exactly a man's man, mechanic type of guy. I'm more the guy who knows how to hire the person who knows how to do important stuff in life. And I remember it started making these weird noises, and I didn't really know what to do. And so I took it over to my mechanic named Levi. I said, hey Levi, look dude, I don't know what's going on with my car, but it's making all these janky noises. And Levi looked at it, he opened up the hood, and he went all through it, and he's like, look David, you got a problem with your O2 sensor, there's a problem with your starter, all these different things, and I swear to God, I'd already fixed before. And I said, well, what does all that mean, Levi? He said, David, what it means is that your car's not going to make it through winter. I was like, dude, this car will totally make it through winter. And he's like, I think you should get a new car. I'm like, no man, I don't need a new car yet. And so I left the mechanic shop and kept driving home. A couple of weeks later, same road, I was driving home. And the old car made a funny noise, and it went, pa, pa, pa. And I kind of coasted over to the right-hand side of the road. And I was immediately filled with rage because I knew what had happened. It was that O2 sensor starter thing that Levi told me I needed to replace and the car wasn't going to live. And now my car had died. And so I got out of my car and I was so mad. I took out my phone and I called the guys at LKQ over in Gorham, the salvage yard, and said, hey look, I got an O2 Mercury. I need to sell it to you guys. And the guy said, okay. He's like, well, describe it. I said, well, it's cranberry color. It's got 4 tires with custom air, 10 pounds of crushed ranch Doritos in the back seat. I'm trying to make this thing sound as good as possible. And he says, I'll give you $500. I'm like, sold. So they come and take it away and buy my car for $500. A couple days later, I'm sitting at home and I'm on Facebook. And I get a message from a guy. He says, hey David, is this the David Pryor with an O2 Mercury Sable? I said, yes. He said, David, are you the same guy who sold it to LKQ? I said, yeah, absolutely. Why? He said, David, what was wrong with that car? I said, oh, I had a problem with the O2 sensor starter and all kinds of other things. He said, oh, okay. He said, David, you know, the funny thing about your car is your car also won't run well when it doesn't have gas. You know, I never thought to check the gas gauges on that car when I jumped out and decided that was it and it was over with. It was time to quit on that car. People had already told me it was going to die, so I just kind of expected that I knew where it was going to end up. Sometimes we've got to slow down and check the gauges. And finally, people always ask me what wound up happening to Elizabeth. Well, Elizabeth eventually got out of that city in New Jersey. She eventually got married. She was married for 51 years. She had 4 boys. One went off to become a very successful classical guitar player. Another son went off to become a very successful businessman. Her 3rd son's traveled the world playing drums. And her 4th son stands here now. And I can tell you as a young man, I used to sit with my mom, and my mom would tell me stories about what it's like to overcome challenge and adversity. And she would tell me that sometimes we face challenges in life because we're going to meet someone else facing that same exact challenge. And because we didn't give up, we can uniquely help that person. There's someone out there today that needs to hear your story if you just don't give up. Thank you guys for having me in today. I'll be hanging out later if you want to say hi.